What's up guys, Tim Little. Welcome back to TacticalBassin. Today's video, we are talking fall finesse. Everything finesse to help you guys catch more fish when the leaves start changing and the bite gets tough. Today we're gonna cover some of my favorite finesse techniques, some baits, some tips to help you guys catch them. Let's go. Those of you guys that have been following along the channel know that recently Matt and I have moved all the way across the country to a new fishery, Lake Chickamauga, and we are in the middle of the full fall transition. They're pulling water on the TVA. The bite is fairly tough, and gotta downsize sometimes to catch fish when it gets tough. It doesn't matter where you are in the country, left coast, right coast, down south, up north. When the bite gets tough, it's time to start thinking finesse. So today I want to talk to you guys about my favorite techniques, my favorite baits, when I like to switch, and why. So starting off, there's so many finesse plastics on the market. You know, you've got tubes and drop shot baits, Ned rigs, Senkos, stick baits, so much stuff. So I'm going to try and simplify it for you because I have some favorites. Starting off, let's talk about when to realize to slow down and pick up a finesse rod. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean a spinning rod. If you guys saw that video a week or so ago, week and a half ago, I caught them really good on a bait casting drop shot, flipping edges of grass. So just because we're talking finesse does not mean you have to use a spinning rod, but it does mean you need to slow down, downsize, and try and catch those fish. Right now, like I said, out here, we're in the middle of the fall transition. All the leaves are changing. The nights are very cold. They're dropping down into the low 50s, high 40s. The water temps dropping down to the low to mid 70s. It was up in the 80s about a week ago. So it's happening fairly quick out here. You guys up north, we covered it in a couple videos last week. You guys are already ahead of us and definitely in that fall season. You guys out west, it hasn't really started yet, but you will, so this stuff applies to you too. You pond and bank fishermen, especially pond fishermen, pay attention because pond fishing, those smaller bodies of water, change very, very quickly. That grass dies back, that water temp drops with those low temperatures at night. So you actually get hit with that transition pretty much overnight. Now, if you guys have been following along, you guys saw that a couple days ago, Matt and I went out. We caught a ton of fish, but they were all small. We were around some big fish, blowing up on small bait. I mean, the shad that they were keying in on was maybe an inch and a half. So this time of the year, if that is the predicament you are in, think about downsizing all of your baits. It doesn't matter if you're throwing reaction, if you're throwing top water, throw a smaller popper, something to match the hatch, mimic that bait the best that you can. But today we're talking about finesse, so let's talk about a drop shot, because a drop shot is super versatile. Like I said, you can throw it on a bait caster, you can throw it on a spinning rod, doesn't matter. There are so many different types of worms, soft plastics to approach the different fish in your fishery: spotted bass, smallmouth, largemouth. Typically this time of the year, I have two different styles of drop shots tied on. You can see right here, this is a Texas rig drop shot. It's rigged weedless. I still have a shad color or a shad pattern tied on, and that is kind of gonna be the same in most of these techniques. I'm downsizing, I'm going natural, I'm trying to match the hatch like I said earlier, so I go with more of the shad profiles in most of these techniques I'm gonna talk to you about. So the drop shot, this is that 4.5 inch fat robo worm, that's prism shad, but you can see most importantly, I have that rigged on a cover shot, straight shanked hook, so it's rigged weedless. Right now, especially where we're at, we have a ton of grass. You can't get away with fishing a typical nose hook bait because you got that exposed hook and you're just gonna be fighting that grass all day long. So I typically, this time of the year, I have both of these tied on. Texas rigged, weedless, and then a nose hook. You guys up north, or you reservoir fishermen that aren't really keying in on grass, go with an exposed hook. You get better hook penetration. A lot of times the fish will hook themselves and you just reel down on them and load up. But if you can get away with it, your hookup ratio is going to be better with the exposed hook. But if you're fishing on Clear Lake, or you're fishing on Chickamauga or Guntersville, something like that where we still have a ton of grass, try throwing a Texas rig drop shot. Now, as far as worms, like I said a little bit earlier, I typically downsize. I go with a bait fish profile. So I will go with a, getting all tangled up here, go with something like this. This is the robo worm. This is the alive shad. A lot more action in the bait. But again, it's that smaller profile, a little bit taller, but it really mimics those bait fish very well. Some of my other favorite drop shot baits, again, I was messing around and just threw a bunch of stuff out here, but talked about the robo worm. Obviously this guy's won so much money this year. That flatworm, if you can get your hands on them, these things obviously are lights out, won so much money. So much money's been won on this bait this year. Another fan favorite, or another favorite of ours, is this guy right here. This is the Big Bite Baits Smallie Smasher. You guys up north, you smallmouth fishermen, this is a phenomenal bait. If you look at these baits closely, they have a lot of similarities in the shape, the profile, and the action. This is actually what my wife caught that recent line class world record smallmouth on, that bait right there. So again, smaller presentation, downsize profile. That Smallie Smasher is great. Obviously that power, or that the flatworm, the alive shad, and another bait that I really like to drop shot is gonna be some kind of swim bait or swim bait style bait. This is typically the time of the year where I get away from drop shotting those 6-inch straight tail worms. They still work, especially on the big fish fisheries, they still work. But when those fish are really keying in on that small bait, it's hard to beat some kind of bait like this. This is actually the Mickey. Just like all this stuff, I will link it down below in the video description. All right, so drop shot. This time of year, again, I typically have 2 rigs tied on, Texas rig and a nose hook rig. Again, just for the reasons I explained earlier, just the ability to fish that Texas rig in the grass. Those fish are gonna pull back into that lively grass. They're gonna get real heavy into it, real buried into that stuff. And as those shad come through, the threadfin, the gizzards, they're gonna get into that grass, they're gonna be feeding around it, and that is where those bass are gonna be hiding to ambush the bait. So a Texas rig drop shot is my #1 way to catch them around grass. If I'm going with a smallmouth fishery or an open water fishery, a reservoir, I'm gonna go with an exposed hook, but I'm gonna go with a shad style bait. So now that we talked about drop shot just a little bit, again, this is finesse stuff. This is, if I was going fishing today, first light, I'm not throwing finesse. I'm gonna throw top water, I'm gonna throw a chatterbait, I'm gonna throw a lipless, I'm gonna throw a square bill. I am gonna throw reaction. But today's video is when you have high sun, slick, calm water. The fish are very finicky. They've been a lot of pressure. You got pre-fish tournaments going on. Everything is not aligning and you still want to catch fish. That is what today's video is about. So #1, the drop shot. #2, sticking with the grass fishermen, the shallow fishermen, go with a shaky head. Again, this is another presentation that you can fish in and around that grass, because again, that is where those fish are hiding. As that grass dies back, then those fish are gonna pull off to the hard bottom, the gravel, the hard clay, the outside structure, the deeper, hard rock bottom near deep water. Again, stuff we've all covered in previous videos, but shaky head is a great presentation to really pick apart that hard structure. I typically don't fish this deep in that thick grass. I will go with a heavier drop shot, but this you can slow down and fish it around that hard structure as that grass dies back and those fish pull to that hard structure. This is something that you can drag out there and really slow fish when they don't want to commit to a crankbait or a chatterbait or something like that. This is probably the only technique out of the techniques that I'm going to talk about today that I really don't downsize. I'm still going to go with a 6 or 7 inch worm. The water's still fairly warm, the fish are fairly active, so I'm still going to go with that bigger profile, but a shaky head is my #2 go-to. Here, fish that one. Now, 2 more baits that I want to talk about for you guys, you smallie fishermen or you open water fishermen, because you can't really talk about a finesse. You can't do a finesse video without talking about Ned rigs, because they work everywhere. So, Ned rig. These work so well when the bite gets tough. When you need to slow down to buy a bite or even to catch fish, a Ned rig has proven itself time and time again, no matter where you are in the country. Again, I don't care if you're on the Delta, California, Clear Lake, up fishing the Great Lakes, or down fishing Florida. If you need a bite, a Ned rig mimics a little goby, a little bait fish, a little sculpin, a little craw very, very well. You know, some of my favorite Ned rig baits, you know, we've all seen the traditional Ned rig baits, the TRD. They're amazing, Elastec, but Z-Man they have some little beaver baits. They got some little, this guy right here is a phenomenal bait. This is the Ticklers or Tickler Z, however you want to say it. It's almost like a TRD, but it has some appendages on it. Of course, I just ripped those off when I pulled it out. But it just has some added action to your basic TRD. Again, it's all this Z-Man stuff. As at Elastec, they last so many fish. You know, they're super, super durable. But adding a little bit extra action, making it look a little bit different than your traditional TRD is a good choice. Some of my favorites, the X Zone. Again, I was throwing all my baits everywhere just to mess around, but the X Zone is this guy right here. This is one of our favorites that we played around with underwater. Had a ton of action, sat up really nicely, but that guy right there, if you're a Ned rig fisherman, you haven't tried this worm, definitely check this guy out. Again, like I said, the Z-Man, the line, the craws, the little creature baits, but just in general, a Ned rig is going to be my number 3 finesse tactic if I need to slow down and catch fish, because it doesn't matter if you're fishing for largemouth, for spotted bass, for smallmouth, it doesn't matter where you are, slowing down, dragging, or hopping a Ned rig puts them in the boat. Two more I want to talk about. I'm not going to talk about a Senko because that's kind of a given, you know, slowing down, just flipping that around the sparse grass, letting it fall, fishing it on a Nico rig with a nail weight down in deeper water is another great way to fish it. But all of these techniques probably deserve their own video, but I just want to talk about 2 more techniques real quick. First is going to be a finesse swim bait. So just like the areas that you would fish a Ned rig or an open exposed drop shot, try downsizing, go with like a Kitech, like a 2.8, but put it on a little guppy head. You know, you can throw this on 5, 6, 7, 8 pound test, 10 pound test, really slow down, finesse fish these. Again, just like you'd fish your Ned rig, just like you'd fish your exposed hook drop shot or your shaky head, fire this out there and fish this around your grass lines or down through that hard structure on that rock bottom. Just creep it down there. Another bait that really works well, so that's the little Kitech 2.8. Little easy shad right there. That's a Kitech. It's got the straight body. It's not ribbed like the fat 2.8. Has a different swim in the water. Check that guy out. Those are my 2 favorites. And then the Armor Shad by Demiki is another great bait to finesse swim bait with. Wrapping it up, one more technique. If you guys don't really want to go finesse, but you still want to throw a jig, check out a little finesse jig. This is a 5/16 ounce head. I got that paired. This is actually the Dirty Jigs finesse jig. Got that paired up with a Rage chunk, so a smaller trailer, but it's still going to have a lot of action. It's just a smaller, compact package. Another really good trailer on this guy right here is going to be the little Pocket Chunk by Netbait. But those 2 trailers paired with a little finesse jig, You can get away with throwing it on a medium action spinning rod, so you don't need a special gear to throw it, but this still gets big bites. But because it is a smaller package, because you can fish it, you know, the lighter head, it's almost a 1/4 ounce. Like I said, it's 5/16. You can get away with throwing it on the spinning rod and still produce bites when they won't eat a big, you know, flipping jig or a big football jig. Downsizing, it's got that trim skirt, comes pre-trimmed. I actually like to trim the longer skirt a little bit back to expose more of the tentacle so I can get more action. But downsizing to a little finesse jig is another great way to catch them when the bite is tough. You know, flipping this around the grass edges, you know, the weed lines, your farthest out dock pilings, all that sort of stuff is a great way to catch fish. One bait that I just looked down to see and totally forgot to talk about it. So backtracking back into the swim bait category, this little guy right here. You guys have seen our videos. Those of you guys that haven't seen it before, this is the Dark Sleeper by Megabass. This is a little tiny swim bait. It comes in, I think, 4 different sizes. This is a little like 2-inch bait. Don't quote me on it, but there's 4 different sizes. But you can get away with this little guy right here. It really mimics a sculpin, little crappie, little bluegill, something like that. But when you can't buy a bite on a 4.8 Kitech or your traditional swim bait, try downsizing to a little swim bait, and you guys will be surprised with what you catch. So there it is, guys. You know, I didn't talk about a tube. I didn't talk about a Senko very much, but these techniques right here, the 4 or 5 techniques, are my top go-to techniques. You know, if I am fishing smallmouth, primarily smallmouth, and I'm fishing a bottom contact bait, obviously a tube is a must-have, but these baits right here will catch fish no matter where you are in the country. So don't be afraid. As the leaves start changing, those nights start getting colder, the water temps drop, and those fish are going through that transition time. You can't buy a bite on reaction. You know, you're trying to force feed them topwater, you're trying to force feed them a swim bait, a chatterbait, and it's not working. Downsize, go finesse, and you will catch more fish. You guys have any questions, please leave them down below in the comments section. I will try to get to those as soon as possible. But looking forward to this fall time out here in eastern Tennessee. So many great fisheries. The bodies of water are so big, and Matt and I are up for the challenge. So continue to follow along as we continue to break down these lakes and go through this fall transition and really key in on those big fish. As always, guys, we appreciate you. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to our channel. We appreciate you. Have a good one.